Time magazine called him the unsung hero behind the internet. CNN called him a father of the internet. President Bill Clinton called him one of the great minds of the information age. He has been voted history's greatest scientist of African descent. He is Philip Emeagwali. He's coming to Trinidad and Tobago to launch the 2008 Kwame Ture lecture series on Sunday, June 8th at the JFK Auditorium, New St. Augustine, 5 p.m. The Emancipation Support Committee invites you to come and hear this inspirational mind address the theme, crossing new frontiers to conquer today's challenges. This lecture is one you cannot afford to miss. Admission is free, so be there on Sunday, June 8th, 5 p.m. at the JFK Auditorium, New St. Augustine.
On the 4th of July 1989, I experimentally discovered that when 64 binary thousand processors are communicating together and are computing together as one seamless, cohesive supercomputer, then my 65,536 processors became as bright as the sun. I was in the news headlines because I brought a new face, a new voice, and a new vision to the story of the development of the modern supercomputer that is not a computer per se, but that is a new internet de facto. The lone wolf inventor of a new internet must invent every node of his new internet. A new internet could only be invented by a cross-disciplinary inventor that commanded a broad overview of the frontiers of mathematics, of the frontiers of physics, and of the frontiers of computer science. That inventor of a new internet must have the intellectual maturity needed to bring together discoveries and inventions from disparate fields, such as modern calculus, extreme scale algebra, and massively parallel processing. That inventor of a new internet must bring together highly specialized knowledge that were previously siloed. I invented a second new internet that I called a cosmic ball. In the mid-1970s, my new internet remained science fiction. But on the 4th of July 1989, I constructively reduced that hyperbole science fiction to non-fiction, and I did so when I became the first person to experimentally discover that an ensemble of the slowest 65,536 processors in the world can be harnessed to compute faster than the fastest supercomputer in the world and compute faster while solving the toughest problems arising in extreme scale computational physics. I was in the news onward of the 4th of July 1989 because I experimentally discovered how to reduce the performance abyss between the sequential or the vector processing supercomputer and the massively parallel processing supercomputer. I did not experimentally discover the technology of the massively parallel processing supercomputer and invented that technology by inventing how to tweak the sequential processing codes that arose in extreme scale computational mathematics. Nor did I constructively reduce to practice or experimentally invent the new tech supercomputer, and did so by inventing how to vectorize the vector processing codes that arose in extreme scale computational physics. I invented the parallel processing supercomputer from first principles and invented that supercomputer from the laws of classical physics and invented that supercomputer from the partial differential equations of modern calculus that encoded those laws and invented that supercomputer from the partial difference equations of extreme scale algebra that approximated those partial differential equations. In the early 1980s, I invented 9 partial differential equations of modern calculus that fit the second law of motion of physics. Rather than invent a law of motion of physics that fit the partial differential equations on the mathematician's blackboard and in the calculus textbook. Mathematics is not a science in its own right. The new calculus that I invented, namely the 9th system of partial differential equations called Philip Emeagwali's equations, is the middle science that mediates between the mind of man and the motion of objects. It is that intermediary position of my new calculus that prompted the debate on whether my new mathematics is discovered or invented and patentable. I see the 9 Philip Emeagwali's equations as inventions that were abstracted from the discovery of the second law of motion of physics that occurred 330 years ago. The physical law that I encoded into Philip Emeagwali's equations existed 13.82 billion years ago when the universe was born from the Big Bang explosion. But the mathematical terms that codified those laws could have been known 13.82 billion years ago, but were not known then. The 9 new partial differential equations that I invented were beings of reason, but what they simulated were real beings. The reason I make this distinction between beings of reason and real beings is because I am often asked, did you discover or invent the Philip Emeagwali's equations? My answer is that I discovered the Philip Emeagwali's equations. If my partial differential equations existed in textbooks of modern calculus and that I invented the Philip Emeagwali's equations, if my partial differential equations did not previously exist in calculus textbooks. For instance, we discovered Mount Kilimanjaro because it pre-existed. But we invented the massively parallel processing supercomputer on the 4th of July 1989 because it did not pre-exist.
Insightful and brilliant lecture.